Hello, I would like to present my project. It is the final one. I went ahead and just put it on my computer, and it will be over Asian Americans and how they were affected and are affected to this day in the American education system. So I'll go ahead and begin. Yeah, so that's just the brief intro. I call it Journey of Ethnic Minority, Asian Americans in the American education system. And I went ahead and added a video just to get things going. So it's only about like a minute long, so I'll just go ahead and play it.
The Asian American story, in very surprising ways, really is everybody's story.
Asian Americans is a documentary series about American history through an Asian American lens.
We have, as Americans, distinct experiences, and once we know our histories and share our histories, we can understand what it means to be Asian in America. To tell the Asian American story, you can't just talk about Asian Americans because, race in the United States is so intricate, so complex. It was not too long ago where Asian Americans were excluded from entering the country.
If we can learn from history, we can avoid repeating it. But even better than that, we can find the things that have moved civilization forward.
We've looked at all these tipping points in American history, and in many unexpected ways, Asian Americans were at the center of those stories.
Part of landmark court cases that have determined a lot of laws, movements that have shaped society.
I hope people who watch this series realize how diverse the Asian American community is and how those stories intersect with the larger story of America.
It's really the history of how people persisted, how people, made a difference.
The American dream is a lovely dream to have, and so people continue to aspire to the American dream.
Asian Americans premieres Monday, May 11th on KQED.
Okay, so that was at PBS.
The Asian Americans.
Oops. Okay. And my thesis statement is that if you wanted to ask an Asian American what it would be like to attend a public school in America, you'd hear varying opinions. In my experience, I was pretty much the only Filipino American girl. There was not really any other Asian students growing up. I attended, so I grew up in the Midwest here in Kansas, and there wasn't really any faces like mine, I always felt like a sense of, I don't want to say isolation because it's kind of difficult to say that's what happened, but I did feel like there was a lot of cultural and, superficial differences that set me apart from the rest of the other children. And yes, according to my thesis statement, I said, we are a token minority, not just Filipino Americans, but Chinese, Japanese, Thai, Korean, and so on and so forth. I mean, in the Midwest, that's kind of normal. Like, you would probably find more Asian Americans in places like states closer to the coast, like California. There's definitely a lot of more Asians there. I've been there in Los Angeles when I was visiting a college, and it kind of just surprised me that there was just so many more Asians walking around compared to being here in Kansas. I grew up facing a stigma that I was expected to be quiet, disciplined, and naturally good at math. Like, my classmates would always ask me questions like, how do you solve this problem? And I would just say, I don't know. I mean, I'm not great at math, sorry. So yeah, there was like a lot of assumptions about what my capabilities were, and that I was supposed to be just smarter than the other kids. And I didn't really know what to make it at the time, but I did feel like that's messed up. But I do think people have sort of wised up by now to not assume things like that, which is good. But I also feel like people are stepping more on eggshells now too. And for a bit of history, I looked into how the earliest Asian Americans experienced segregation and exclusion. And here is a picture of the propaganda that Chinese Americans faced at the time. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the student, but also kind of, yes, it does, because that depicts like a Chinese man having a hard time finding work in America because of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. Even though Asian Americans have been in classrooms since the 19th century, it was not really on equal terms. Like, the racism was pretty bad. Anyway, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 affected Chinese American children because in California they were legally barred from attending white public schools, and instead required to attend segregated Chinese schools instead, that were usually underfunded and stigmatized. Like, they didn't get the nice books or as much funding to do like excursions that are fun compared to other white public schools. And one of these famous examples has to do with the Tate versus Hurley during the 1885, about 3 years after the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed. Basically, what happened is that Spring Valley School in San Francisco refused to admit an 8-year-old girl named Mammy Tate because she was Chinese. They won so they went to court and won, but even though they won the case, the school still refused to admit Mammy because they claimed that she did not get her vaccinations filled in time. So they won, but also she still didn't get to go to the school, which wasn't fair to her. And her mom had plenty to say about that. And it still gets talked about to this day. Like, Spring Valley School apologized, but history doesn't forget. And here's just a brief video I found that has to do with Mammy. So this is not actually her. This is someone who's speaking on her behalf. Mammy today is dead now, so didn't find a video about her, but it does include pictures.
You can be an American, you can have pride in your country, but you also have to have a deep and abiding appreciation for your cultural heritage. It's really important what Mamie Tate represents to all of us. If Mamie were alive today, she would be wanting to carry on the goals and dreams of her parents. I think it really was Mary. The words to describe Mary would have been feisty and forthright, because in the documentation that's brought up about the Tate v. Hurley case, there's a letter that Mary Tate wrote to the school board or to the principal, but she was outraged that her 8-year-old daughter was not being allowed to attend school. Mary knew, she was smart, and she knew that it was because her children were of Chinese descent. The message for school children is to be really open to differences in everybody and to have compassion, to feel they are entitled to be treated fairly.
Okay, so that was her niece actually. I just thought that was a random spokesperson, and I might have gotten her name wrong, but let's continue. So this here is the model minority. In the 20th century, Asian Americans were often viewed as unassimilable foreigners and subject to school segregation and social hostility. For example, Japanese American students faced disruptive schooling during World War II due to incarceration in camps and relocation programs. Recent research on the World War II student relocation program shows how Japanese American students were expected to present themselves as loyal, hardworking, and self-sacrificing in their college essays, to basically prove that they were not the enemy and that they were almost subservient to being in America at the time. And this is just a brief pamphlet I found. Let's see. I wanted to also add that cultural and family expectations play a huge role in schooling, not just in their origin, their countries of origins. They affect how Asian American students grow up in America. Most of the parents just immigrate to America, and then they have these expectations that carry over on their children to succeed. And I have personally experienced it myself, though I did not experience like the brunt of the stories I've heard about how bad it can be. So I guess I'm lucky. But anyway, high expectations and the family sacrifice story is what is a common thing you'll hear a lot. Like, I brought my children into the country. We came here so you could have a better life, so don't waste it. You have to succeed and get a job and make lots of money so you can support the family. If you asked any Asian students if they've ever heard anything like that from their parents, chances are more likely they will probably say yes, or they will word it in a way that is yes, but also they're not, trying to throw their parents under the bus because they're expected to be grateful. Oh. So the students are, students like me have been pushed to take advanced classes, join useful club activities, and it results in intense pressure. Like, when it comes to facing failure, it's like a second alternative of death. There's not really a coping mechanism that's great to describe it. And the cost of that, being pushed to succeed, does come at a cost to mental health. So culturally, growing up, you don't really hear about resources about mental health. Usually, you'll hear things like, don't be weak, or just work harder. And we're not really, you might hear that from relatives or parents. If you were an Asian child growing up, not go see a counselor. It's just kind of like, suck it up and all that. And if you, basically, a lot of worth was based on grades. And if you had like a bad grade, it would be seen as like a personal failure, not a sign that you need support. Like, yeah, you'll get tutors, but the end result is what they're really looking for. And families like those, they value saving face in front of like others. Don't bring shame into the family. So in school, if an Asian American kid or an Asian is struggling, they're going to be a lot more quieter. They're not going to be like openly rebellious, unless, they're just, they kind of integrate into a group that lets them do that sort of thing. But if you have strict parents, like tiger moms, dragon dads, rebellion can look like students avoiding tutoring or counseling, even when it's available, hiding bad grades, report cards, behavior issues, internalizing stress, insomnia, anxiety, burnout, self-blame. And yeah, personally, I have experience with emotional avoidance and hiding my grades if they don't meet my parents' standards. And there is a lot of competition, like getting compared to other kids, their performance, so that we can be pushed to do better. And while that may work short-term effect, it can also create a lot of resentment and self-esteem issues in the long run, which to this day I still deal with. And I got this from Noble Magazine about how it's reported who, based on what races actually do make uses of mental health services. And as you can see, Asian is the lowest because we're taught to be independent and internalize our pain. So we don't really have a lot of experience or comfort just talking about our feelings. Like, even if we're struggling, we wouldn't even tell our parents. We would just try to not be weak about it. But on the brighter side, there is, it's not all bad. Like, you do have support, high aspirations, community, cultural expectations. They are meant to be protective and empowering. And the parents can do value high education, and they'll be willing to sacrifice financial assets for better tutoring, books, better schools. And there's a collective mindset that if students from these families were to get together, they would know that they're not alone. And although this method can be pretty intense, it can create a strong work ethic if the child is resilient enough. How does this connect to school structures? Basically, if you were to see an Asian American student, they might use phrases like, we don't need help because we're strong and smart. Sometimes this can actually mask building stress or learning issues because they were just taught not to really ask for help, even if they do need it, because it kind of creates a sense of shame. And counselors may not question realistic course loads or family pressure because Asian students are used to it. In other words, the cultural and family expectations and how students appear may not match up with what's needed for the students. And sometimes the school systems will overlook these expectations and the support they need just because they're a minority. So always look for signs if someone needs help. Just because they're quiet doesn't mean that they don't have a voice that actually wants to be heard. And that's my citation sources. I'll be sure to send a copy of this. Thank you.